Okay, hello everyone. My name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the MedComms networking activity, which is now a sort of global community activity for people working in and around MedComms, by which I mean people who work in medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and you can see what we're doing at medcommsnetworking.com. Part of that activity over the last few years has been developing more and more resources and information for people who want to come into MedComms to start working in MedComms. We've now gathered those resources together at FirstMedCommsJob.com, and hopefully you've all seen those resources. There's a wide range of articles, videos, and so on. There's careers events, there's careers guides, and so on. One of the things I've been doing since the end of last year is trying to do more of these Zoom videos, Zoom webinars, which seems to me a very easy way of reaching out to far more people. We can get more people involved, give you more insight into the business and so on. So I'm pleased today to have Lindsey. Thank you very much for joining us, Lindsey. Lindsey is the author of our new our careers guide for account managers, which we've just launched the second edition of. So the careers guides, there's 3 of them. They're annual guides. Each year we update them, and we've literally just published online. If you go to FirstMedCommsJob.com, as we're speaking today, we've literally just published the second edition of Lindsey's guide. So I've been a bit optimistic. Lindsey's obviously not got very much to do this week. And I've said, come online and have a chat to us about life in MedComms as an account manager. And it gives you a chance to ask some questions of her. So big thanks to Lindsey. I'm going to now hand over to Lindsey, who's going to run us through a short presentation, and then we will be able to ask some questions of her. So thanks, Lindsey. It's over to you.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, as Peter says, my name's Lindsey. I've been in medical communications for about 15 years now, nearly all of that on the commercial or client service or account management side of things. You can ask us about any of this when we get to the end, but what I'm going to focus on today is account management, and principally how you can get in, how you can go and meet all these interesting people and do work that you enjoy and work that you're proud of. So let's get stuck into account management. Okay, so hopefully, as Peter says, you've taken a look at FirstMedCommsJob.com, and perhaps you've seen the careers guide. So you'll have a general idea that account managers are there to help their team deliver projects on brief, on budget, and on time. So the key skills you need there are principally, I would say, listening. You really need to understand what your clients want your team to deliver for them, and understand what they're trying to achieve. And then that communication ability to be able to talk to your team about how you think this should be delivered, and then talk to everybody about the best steps and the timelines. In terms of budgets, you don't need to be a mathematical genius, trust me on that one, but you do need to be not scared of numbers. Agencies generally run on the numbers of hours being worked to deliver a project, and therefore how much that project costs to client, and the account managers are an integral part of budgeting and invoicing and financial tracking. Deadlines are a key part of agency life. It's quite a fast-paced environment, and again, that role of account management is all about not just thinking about the end deadline, but the steps required to get there, and so what everybody should be doing at each point along the way. Not things you have to do on day one, but I just wanted to give you an idea of where you'd be heading. Clients. So who are your clients? So we talk about the industry. You'll have read bits and bobs about that, but really who you're working with on a day-to-day basis are medics in medical affairs quite often, people from marketing, people, researchers from the scientists who maybe helped discover and develop the drug that you're working on, and people in compliance. And they're all trying to achieve the same goal for their company and their brand, but they will all want to get there in slightly different ways or have different approaches. And your job as an account manager, again, is to listen to what they're all trying to achieve. And eventually, your job will be sometimes trying to find a common ground, and again, feed that back to your team so that everybody's got a crystal clear understanding of what they need to be doing and when. One of the other groups that you'll work with, and one of the great privileges of being in medical communications, is working with clinicians who are at the top of their game. These people are critical to the pharmaceutical industry's success in terms of speaking about disease awareness and about specific products. And our job in MedComms is to represent our clients impeccably, to be ambassadors and work with these people as they become authors of publications, as they give advice and insights to your clients, and as they speak at big international conferences or at smaller events locally. Increasingly, we also get to work with patient advocates who speak on behalf of the communities and groups that are set up for groups of patients, which is, I would say, a building trend within the industry, and one that's really exciting and a specialist as well to be involved in. Finally, your colleagues. Colleagues are the best. Colleagues are where you get your inspiration, your support, most of your training. You'll be surrounded by people who've been in the industry for years. You'll be surrounded by people who have very different skills. And as an account manager, you need to find a way, you need to adapt your own ways of working to them. That's one of the great skills of being a really successful account manager, is that you're working with people who are interested in the details, who are interested in the event side of it, who are interested in the technology, who are, you know, stuck their head in the science, or who want to look at the big picture. And you get to interact with all of them. And if you do that well, you'll go a long way. But as we're talking about entry level trainees, please don't ask to work from home as a trainee account manager if you can possibly avoid it, because you will be missing out on so many opportunities to learn from your colleagues, and that really is the best way to absorb the day-to-day life of the industry and of agencies. I think we've probably covered most of the core skills in terms of teamwork, communication. Communication is also about verbalizing your own ideas, getting across clearly your recommendations, what you think could happen, or trying something new. Organization, that comes down to the budgets again, and the plans and the timelines. That's why this is on post-its. I think liking post-its is a very good sign for account managers. Attention to detail. Yes, there are editors and there are people who will proofread major pieces of work that are going out to hundreds of thousands of people or showing on a big screen at a congress, but you are still representing your team and your agency and your clients when you write an email, and no one's going to be checking your emails for you once you're up and running. So that attention to detail naturally is a really important skill. The same goes with budgets. When you're checking, you know, in spreadsheets and things like that, a small mistake can have big implications, so you need to double check and triple check things. I've put a question mark on science because I have a science degree, but and I would say it probably helps. It makes life easier, certainly to begin with. You just understand the language people are talking. Not necessarily all the details of different diseases and different treatments, but it's just that the way people talk and write, I think probably comes more naturally if you've been studying it for a while. Having said that, some of the best account managers I know do not have a scientific background. They might come from event management or something like that. And so it's by no means essential. I just think it probably makes life a little bit easier. So those are those core skills that we've talked about. And then when you're trying to get in, I think one of the first steps, and probably the point that everybody's at least, is doing the research and looking at open days and careers events. So Peter's already mentioned FirstMedCommsJob.com. There's a really good one of these webinars from Julia Walton talking about CVs. She's a recruitment specialist, so I would take a look at that. MedComms networking, there's just broader information. And those places are really good places to gather names of agencies in the business. And then you can look at their individual websites and see how they come across, what you think their approaches are, whether they seem to take entry-level roles, because not all agencies do, whether they set up specialist programs for training and supporting trainees, and then also looking on LinkedIn, because you might find that they advertise their careers days, their open days there. So that's a really, really good place to start. And obviously you're going to read the careers guide if you've got this far, so that's good. So do ping me any feedback that you like on LinkedIn. I'd be happy, really happy to hear it. And do go. I would encourage you to go to careers events. It's a fantastic opportunity to meet people from lots of different agencies and get a feel for how they represent themselves, and to get to talk to people who are doing the job day in, day out. So as well as some of the more senior people from the agencies there, a lot of people bring along people who were in your position a year or so ago. So you can really ask whatever you like, and make a good first impression on a number of people as well. So that's a really good step. I won't go into this in too much detail. Obviously, you all know that you're going to do a CV, you're going to apply to these people. They'll probably ask you to do a test and invite you to an interview or two. All I would say is that this is a really good example for people who've had no experience in MedComms. Your application is really a good way to demonstrate the essence of what MedComms is all about. You are summarizing yourself succinctly. You're trying to think about who's reading your CV and your cover letter, what information they need to know. So it's not everything you've ever done in your life, it's what you think is relevant. And answering those important questions like, why are you applying for this role and why do you think you'll be good at it? And if you can write there succinctly what you want to say, then that's a really good representation of yourself and a really good example of the kind of thing that you would be doing in MedComms, albeit not about yourself, but a new drug or a disease area. That's really most of what I wanted to say, and really you can ask us about any of that afterwards. But I just wanted to say, take your time to find a company where you think you will fit in well, because agencies do differ enormously in terms of whether they've just set up, whether they're well established, whether they're a small group of people, whether they're part of a large network, whether they specialize in publications or technology. And I think people coming into the business now have this huge advantage in terms of this natural affinity with technology that people like myself who struggle and battle with it simply don't have, and that's going to be a huge shift in the way medical communications is delivered. So really something to capitalize on. Yes, publications or live events, whether you'll get to travel, that kind of thing to look into. And again, yes, whether you just want to get stuck in straight away and do on-the-job training, or whether you think you're the sort of person who would prefer to go through a formal program where you do rotations and go through certain courses and things like that. All of those things are worth considering and talking to people during your application process, so that you can find somewhere that you fit in, and obviously also the people that you meet, because a lot of your enjoyment from work will come from those people. So I wish you all the very best of luck in your applications, but do let us know if you've got questions. Peter?
Fantastic. Thanks, Lindsay. Can you just unshare your screen? We'll go back to us sitting there like that. Thanks. And again, a reminder to everybody, this is about answering your questions. So you, at the bottom of your screen, you should have a chat button and a Q&A button. Use either to text in your questions, your comments, and we'll deal with them as they come. Lindsay, can I just start with an obvious point, which you sort of, which is worth, I think, saying. Just give us a brief sense of how you got into MedComms. What's your background? You said you had a science background, but what was your journey in?
I did a physiology and pharmacology degree, or biomedical sciences, and then I went into medical information, actually. First of all, I knew I didn't want to work in a lab. I'd done a year in a lab as part of my degree, and like many people joining MedComms, it's like, oh, I like science, but I don't want to work in a lab. We hear that a lot. And I answered a job advert in the back of the New Scientist and joined the industry. So I worked for a company that doesn't exist anymore called Shearing Healthcare in their medical information department. So I was answering questions on all of their products, and mostly in women's health, which was really good. But then I was interacting with agencies quite regularly as part of my support for medical affairs and marketing teams, and really enjoy writing, actually. So I joined an agency as a writer, which I enjoyed, but once I was in, I could see that I was much better suited to account management, and I think that happens quite regularly as well, and some people might be considering both paths, whether they'd be a writer or an account manager, and I think that that's quite commonplace and understandable. And some agencies will even say, you know, will tell you what they think when they meet you, or invite you to come in and say, well, come in, start as this, or try doing both, see which you prefer. It depends on the agency really. But yeah, so I joined as a writer, but I did that for about 9 months, and then I've been then I was an account manager ever since.
Okay, and you've worked for a couple of the larger agencies, haven't you? And now you're freelancing, yeah?
Yes, they were both tiny when I started, though. I would say
Right,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you've gone on to freelancing. So again, it's sort of, just making the point that people are looking at the sort of the landscape, as it were, coming into an agency, the career pathway. The freelancing is certainly an option later on down the line, and maybe we'll come back to that. But so looking at the different agencies, and you started as a writer, and then became an account manager. Can you just sort of touch on, maybe if you can easily, what are the differences? What do you think are the differences between sort of someone who's more inclined to writing, someone who's more inclined to account management?
Well, I enjoy writing. I wrote the careers guide with you, and I have written throughout my career. But I would say I enjoy simplifying things, and it doesn't matter how complex the science is. I like taking that science and making it very simple and putting 3 points on a slide or whatever that might be. I didn't enjoy actually the technical writing, and the agency I was at the time was very much focused on publications, and I don't even really think I had the patience for that, because you will put your heart and soul into something, you'll write it, and then you'll send it off to the authors who might not get back to you, and it takes a long time, the whole publications process, or it can do, which I didn't so much enjoy. But I would say, if you look at these core skills that we've talked about, are you the one that organizes things amongst your friends? Are you generally an organized person? Do you like talking with people, meeting different kinds of people? Do you like or do you like really getting stuck into the science? You care passionately about that, and you would love to have a desk, covered in clinical papers, sifting through the information, trying to get to the heart of the matter. I would say one thing across all of the board is that there's never quite enough time to do what you want to do when you're in an agency. And I think that's one of the things I admire most about medical writers, is that not only are they producing this scientifically accurate, quality piece of work, but they're also doing it with a timeline in their head of, right, well, I can't spend 3 weeks on this, even though I would love to. So that's one thing that I think we all share in common, is you have to work quickly
across the board. And I think one of the things we need to just address, and not get bogged down in, but people need to understand that there's a tendency to talk about writers and account managers like they're two different beasts, like there are two different departments everywhere, that is one route or one route. Actually, most agencies, there's going to be a mixture of people working in a mixture of roles. And yes, there are agencies where they do have essentially account managers and writers, but even in those situations, there's going to be some crossover, and lots of agencies actually now, more so now than they used to, have people working across the roles. And there are agencies which will take on writers and say a big part of your role is dealing with clients and the client services and the account management side, project management side. And one of the things that people, I think, they need to sort of get a sense of where they fit on that spectrum of activity, and then they need to be looking at agencies where they will fit, because in some agencies, let's just take that as an example. So in some agencies, the medical writers will very much be working through an account management type of group of people. In other agencies, they either won't be there, or there'll be a lot more direct contact. So individually, you need to sort of think a little bit about where you fit on that spectrum, but it's not absolute. You're either
absolutely,
that.
yeah. And I think, and the best teams that I've worked on is where we've had a commercial or account lead working absolutely alongside a scientific lead, and they work together. So you literally are seeing it from, and the account person is seeing it from the client's perspective, and then the scientific lead is seeing it from what needs to be done, and you work together to deliver that. And I think those are the best teams, where you do have that mix, but the people recognize each other's strengths. But there is definitely some crossover.
Yeah, absolutely. Just and on that point, let's just pick up Poppy's question. Is it common for an account manager to have a hand in content creation again, or does it vary from agency to agency? We're probably going to answer a lot of these questions by going, it depends, and it varies across agencies. But I guess that's what we're touching on here, that the account managers aren't sitting there just doing the numbers or something and letting the writers just do the content creation. It's a team approach. Everyone's got skills. There's strategy, there's creativity, there's stuff. Does that answer Poppy's question? Or have you got anything that you can add to that?
Well, yeah, I would just say I don't want account managers to come across as kind of budgets and timelines. You have to know what your client is trying to achieve, and that's always in the scientific realm of things. So then, for example, content creation might be, say you're going to run a meeting with clinical experts. You might be the person that's doing the agenda because you should know what are the key topics that need to be talked about. When it comes to maybe writing one of the presentations for that meeting, again, then you're working with one of the writers, and you can say this is what needs to come across, and then they will, do a beautiful presentation or something like that. But yeah, it's not just, well, this needs doing and it needs to be done by then and it needs to cost this much. That's quite a dull job, and I think you could do it anyway. You do need to get stuck into the disease area and the drugs in terms of what you're trying to achieve for your client. Otherwise otherwise it's going to be no fun.
It's going to be boring, yeah. But we're going to constantly, I think, be emphasising this is a team that you're a part of.
Yeah.
Whatever level you're at, whatever role you're in, there's a team of people around you. This isn't somewhere where somebody just does their own thing. Let's start at the beginning. There's a question over here on the Q&A box for account managers. Does one have to do a writing test? Let's get back to the basics, because I think you mentioned tests as part of the process. So let's answer the specific question. Do you face a writing test, and what other sort of tests might you face?
I'd be surprised if you had to do a writing test for an account manager role. I'd be surprised if you didn't have to do one for a writing role. The tests that I've seen for account managers might be things like they will set you a task, and they might say something like, your clients have asked you what are the options for sponsoring this congress that's coming up next year, because they're interested in whether they want their name on the congress bags, or whether they want to sponsor a meeting at that event. And so then they'll ask you to summarize the options. So what you then have to do is go to the congress website, look through all the information, and then succinctly summarize it back. And that's exactly the sort of thing you'd be doing in your day-to-day job. So that's a nice kind of test, that kind of thing, summarizing information, sending it back. So that's writing. Other things might be costing up the options, for example, or maybe they'll send you a budget and an email that says, I need you to make all these changes to the budget, and they'll check that you've accurately reflected it in the spreadsheet, for example, something like that. So something to check your attention to detail, essentially, but nothing like summarize these 4 oncology papers into a manuscript.
Which is what you'd get more on the writing side, yeah. So again, it's important. It'll come up all the time. Attention to detail. They really are looking. Everything you're doing, they're looking to see whether you've got that attention to detail. My experience of agencies, or what I see of agencies doing these sorts of tests on all sides, is they're not really trying to catch people out. I don't hear of agencies doing clever tests to catch people out. So they're essentially giving you some information and asking you whether you can interpret it and do what they've asked you to do. And if you do, then you're paying attention, you're understanding, you're in attention detail and so on. And that's almost all they're really often looking for, because it's surprising how many people can't.
Yeah, it is a filter, and I've had that conversation many times, and it's like when you start the job and it's kind of, well, I'm going to ask you to write the minutes for this call or a summary of this call, and it's surprising how many people really struggle with that. So those are really good tests to send to candidates, and initial tasks to give people when they join, because it really is about listening, paying attention, reading that information and communicating it clearly.
Yeah, all the way through. The emails, you want to address them to the right people, that sort of thing.
Applications that say hi.
You've got to be a little bit careful with that. Yeah. Okay. And then interviews and so on. We probably not the time to spend a lot of time on that sort of thing, because an interview is an interview. But what sort of once they come in, what sort of training opportunities are there? And there's a question here: what's the sort of career trajectory? So actually, I've just seen another question. I'll come back to that one. But so you're coming as an account manager. What sort of training are they offered, and what's the sort of career trajectory that they'd go up?
It's a really good question to have ready for your interview, certainly, because it will vary agency to agency. Some agencies will say, look, this is purely on the job training. And I don't want people to dismiss that, because it's a really, really good way to learn. You need a mentor, a manager, someone who's going to walk you through each step. So the first time you write an email to a client, they will check it for you. But you might be on the ground working with the team from day one in that regard. And so that as tasks come up on a daily basis, you'll be asked to have the first go, and then someone will check it. And that's very kind of commonplace way of training people who are coming in at entry role. More so than I've seen before, agencies and particularly the bigger networks are coming up with these training programs, where you might rotate around different teams or different areas of the business to get some experience. And I think that's really interesting. And then I would imagine they're still using internal people, but in terms of developing content and the training sessions, and everybody's really thinking about, right, what are the core skills and the key abilities that people need to be able to do their job effectively, and let's formalize that into a training program. So whereas you might have your manager sitting next to you taking you through it bit by bit, you also might be part of a group of people that have joined on the same day, listening to a presentation and asking questions in that way. But it's all about taking you through those key abilities that you need to be able to do your job.
It's been interesting. I mean, certainly I'd concur with that. There's several agencies, if not many agencies, over the last year or two who are suddenly coming out with these sort of formalised training schemes and so on. And in terms of the sort of, do I go in as a writer, as an account manager, whatever, there's not many, but there are certainly schemes that are now there as academy type schemes. You come in and you work for a year in different areas. And essentially at the end you decide, or between you decide whether you're going to go more writing or account management or whatever it is. But there's a lot more training now. Having said that, a lot of it is still on the job, isn't it?
Yeah, which I think is fine. It's I think that the training programs are a nice way to keep things consistent, making sure everybody's been trained in the same aspects of the job. But on the job training also, not to be dismissed. Especially if you're working with a team that you really enjoy working with, because you're going to be able to ask them whatever you want, and they're going to spend the time and take you through each step as they go through it, which is brilliant training.
Yeah, and there's a question here: do you double down on do you go into a situation knowing you want to do writing, knowing you want to do account management, or do you sort of keep flexible? My own view would be have an awareness of what you want to do, but be aware that your first job is the tough one, and once you get in, you can move around relatively easy. And you might surprise yourself anyway. If you desperately want to be a writer, we've had those at the careers events. People desperately want to be a writer, and then walking away at the end going, well, actually, account management really sounds quite interesting. So,
because I think it's hard to know. I mean, obviously,
exactly, until you're there.
Big difference there, but it is. I went in thinking that I enjoy writing and I enjoy science, but I didn't really understand what account management was until I got in there, and it was clearly a much better role for me than writing. So it is hard to know. So, but I do think there's a lot more information out there now than there used to be.
As in your guide. There you go. Larissa, you've asked a question. Sometimes difficult to identify entry-level jobs. That I'm not quite sure from that bit, but you're saying what kind of job titles, roles, terms are commonly used? What are you searching for? Again, this plays something we've already mentioned, that the terminology is different. Account managers, project managers, account execs. It can be a little bit confusing. Lindsey, have you got anything you can add to that for Larissa there in terms of what she should be searching for that entry-level job?
Well, I think you've probably just covered them. Project managers, account execs, trainee, entry level, all of those things. I mean, you're just going to have to read the description, but I think and find out a little bit more about it. There should be enough information in the description for you to figure out whether that's the kind of thing you want to do. I mean, sometimes in some agencies, a project manager is different from an account manager. Yeah. So it's about, trying to ask some questions and find that out, I suppose.
It is a little tricky. And what I would certainly suggest or encourage you, if you've not done it already, is go and look at our jobs board for what it's worth. Next MedComsJob has a bunch of jobs for entry level, and it's worth having a look at those, and you'll get an idea of the language. But an important point also here is that a lot of the agencies are not advertising very heavily for entry level. people. They might say something on their website. We'll have some of the jobs there. There's probably not, there might be a bit on LinkedIn, places like that, but there's not a lot, because actually they are getting contacted a lot all the time. And also on that point, anyone coming into MedComms, whilst I would personally encourage you to talk to the recruiters and get some sense of what's going on, most specialist recruiters won't be able to place you in an agency as an entry level, because they don't handle those jobs. Most agencies, MedComms agencies, will be taking you on directly. So have a good look around the websites. If, again, come back to my website, I list all the agencies. I mean, it's not an absolute, but I list a lot of MedComms agencies. I have a map of where they are based in the country. There's a certain amount of this is just doing the legwork and going around and having a look. And there's nothing wrong with spontaneously just speculatively sending an email or picking up the phone or something and seeing what they're doing. So some of these agencies increasingly have these formalized programs. They're agencies where it's once a year, twice a year, 3 times a year. Most of them it's more fluid than that, and you need to knock on the doors really and find out what's going on. I missed a. So I hope that's helping, Larissa. If you want to get a bit more specific or something, come back to us again. In terms of coming back into, the question we were talking about the career trajectory, maybe just worth making the point that coming in as an account exec or whatever the terminology is onto the account management side, you're probably going to start very much at the admin level, and then gradually as confidence builds and so on, you'll start getting involved with clients and so on. Some of those roles are going to be very much dealing with project management aspects. Some of those roles will develop at least into more business development type roles. And as you get up towards account director type level, you're going to probably be more involved strategic level with the clients and so on. Yeah. So it's sort of, account exec, account manager, senior account manager, account director, whatever is the sort of obvious thing. Yeah.
And you might start off looking after one aspect of a project. So, we're going to give you this job as part of this event that we're organizing, for example. And then, further on down the line, the whole event is what you're looking after. And then maybe a whole account. And then, as you progress, you might be overseeing a number of accounts, perhaps for one client company. And along with that comes all of the, passing on what you've learned to people who are just joining, mentoring, managing, team leadership, getting involved maybe in the more business side of the agency itself in terms of how that business operates, and recruitment, is always good fun. All of those kind of things. So there's lots of different aspects and different paths and routes and things that you can focus on depending on the agency that you're in.
Yeah, and just picking up, I knew I'd seen it somewhere. How long will you expect to stay at entry level? Is impossible to say. I always just go a year or so, but the truth is it depends on you, how hard you work, how fast you work, what the opportunities that arise up in front of you. So, it's an agency environment, so you don't know necessarily whether you're going to get a new account next week or the week after. You don't know whether you lose it. There are changes like that are happening, but a lot of it is down to you. Basically.
How well you do.
And how well you do.
Yeah.
But then, again, an important point, which we often touch on in these meetings, is there's no real cap to any of this. So, okay, in some of the bigger companies, there's a more of a structure. But in lots of agencies, really, if you run with it, they'll support you, and people can grow an account behind them and suddenly be running a business unit or something like that really quite quickly if it goes well. But it's sort of a lot about you and how you do and your approach to it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also a question there about freelancing.
I was going to come back to freelancing if I can. I wanted to try and keep freelancing just towards the end, as it were. We've got a question here about examples of projects. We've touched on a couple, but let's take an example. How might it work? The phone rings and, what might be happening? Say there's a new client on the phone. What sort of things might they be asking, and what sort of projects, and where do you go from there?
So a client, maybe, who you've just started working with, may ring up and say, I'm going to this meeting and I need a slide deck to summarize all of our clinical trial program, but I'm leaving on Wednesday, kind of thing. And so then it's just about, on the account management side, either it's saying, okay, do you want to give us a proper brief? I can gather the team, we can set up a call. Or it's saying, okay, let me get the key points down now. So what is it exactly that you need? When exactly do you need it by? Who else needs to see it? All of those key questions. I'm not panicking about the timelines. You just have to kind of figure out, okay, and do you have any materials that you're already using? All of those kind of really thinking about what needs to happen and by when, and what they're really trying to achieve. Because sometimes clients will ask you for something and it's just you kind of maybe think, well, is that the best way of trying to do what you're trying to do? So for example, they might be going to a congress and they might think, so therefore I'm going to have an advisory board meeting. And an advisory board meeting is where you kind of get the top experts in their area together to discuss some key points. And so your client rings up and says, I'm going to a congress, there must be some important people there, let's have an advisory board meeting. And so at short notice, it's probably not the best way to go about these things. So you can say, look, if your ultimate aim is to meet these people and to interact with them, then let's set up some one-to-one sessions and some key points for discussion. If you have a topic that you are genuinely seeking advice on, then let's organize an advisory board. But organizing it with 3 weeks notice is not the way to get the best people to give you the advice you want. So it's just all about really listening to what they're trying to achieve, jotting down those details, then gathering your team together and saying, okay, this is what we've been asked to do. What do you think? What are the questions? And then compiling all those questions and going back to clients and pulling together a budget and saying, okay, well, we've thought about what you want to do. This is how long we think it will take, and this is how much we think it will cost you. What do you think? And having those, backwards and forwards negotiations about what needs to happen and by when, and then kicking off the project with your team, and then keeping track with them throughout the life of the project. Say, so this is where we expect it to be. How's it going? Do you want me to look at anything? Is there anything we need to discuss? And being available for questions throughout, and keeping your client informed on where you are with the project, what's happening, what they can be expecting to receive to review, and just saying, yep, and budget's tracking fine, all of those things. So keeping everybody informed, really, so that every stage in a project, people know who's doing what and by when. And that's really kind of the principal job, because people get very nervous when they don't know what's going on, or when they're fearful of what might be coming. Whereas if they're informed, and then they're calm.
Excellent. And calm is good.
Calm is
so
good.
let's just finish on the freelance note, and just touch on this. So you said, I think you said in your presentation as well, which is a point that's worth making or reinforcing, that when you start in MedComms, it's not only a good idea to be in the agency office. To be honest, most agencies, if not all agencies, will insist on it. So you're sort of going to have to get in there, get that experience, and get a useful amount of that experience under your belt. However, then the freelance opportunity is there, and that's the world's at your doorstep sort of thing. So just touch on this a little bit. How easy is it? How realistic is it to go out freelancing? What are the challenges there?
I think this is one aspect that's very different for writers and account managers personally. I have worked with lots of different freelancers over the past 15 years, and I think quite a lot of agency will have a bank of really reliable freelancers that they go to and almost become part of the team. Freelance writing, you can imagine somebody who wants to work from home, and so you can brief them on a project, they can deliver it, you can talk to them. We've got technology like this. It's very easy to stay in touch with people and Skype them and what have you. So no problem. But again, to do that, you need a bank of people that you know and can go to for work reliably before you get to that point. So it's still something that you need to do with a lot of experience under your belt. For account managers, a lot of the role is interacting with the team and being on call, I suppose, for clients, in terms of you can't say, well, yeah, I do know the answer, but I only work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, so I can't get back to you. That kind of thing doesn't really fly as an account manager. We really are in a customer service role at the end of the day, and that it's important to be available. Now, I'm saying that as a freelancer, but I have been working for 15 years and I've met quite a few people and I've worked with quite a few people who I can speak to and say, would you like any help with something? You know, I principally work from home, but I will come to your office and I will travel to client headquarters for meetings and things like that. And so I think that there's that side of things to consider. It's harder, I think, in account management to be part-time and to be remote. It's not impossible, but it's harder. And it depends why you want to do it then. If you want to be a freelance account person so that you can work with lots of different agencies for a year at a time, great. But I don't know anybody like that. I think most people are doing it because they've got other commitments, family and the like. So you know, it's tricky on the account management side. Freelancing is trickier. You need to have that contact database, and bear in mind that you were on this career path of being account exec, account manager, senior account manager, account director, senior account, all of that, and maybe your career progression was going to be, you know, being an important part of the business or something like that. That stops as a freelancer. So you know, for example, I was managing a commercial team at an agency, and now if I freelance, sometimes an account director, sometimes I'm doing other things, but it's not now about kind of climbing a ladder, I suppose. I'm not saying it won't be, but this works for me now, but it's not the goal, I don't think.
Okay, I think that's an important distinction you make. Again, everything's on a spectrum, but I run a service for freelancers, the MedComms workbook, and a lot of projects go out. You know, it's like we want someone to run an advisory board or write an advisory board meeting up or write a manuscript or whatever. And sometimes it's like we need support for the next few months on a series of these projects. But it's a bit more sort of project based. You can do the writing and then move. Account managers, the opportunities that come through tend to be, we need someone to manage this account for the next 6 to 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, be someone going on maternity.
It's quite exactly. It's different. So it's entirely doable, and there's plenty of you out there, but it is different. And it's something, and freelance life suits some people and not others, but it's just something to think about a little bit before you rush into it. What I'd like, if I may, because I've got an eye on the time, and I think we've done our sort of our little time for our recording today. So if I may, I'd like to draw the formal part of this session to a close. As I said at the beginning, everyone who's online today, please feel free to stay online, and we can carry on talking and answering. So there's at least a couple of questions we haven't touched on there. So thank you very much for joining in. But I'd like to, and a huge thanks to Lindsey. Thank you very much for joining. And I know you're very happy to hear from people on LinkedIn and so on.
Absolutely.
So do make contact. Do come to FirstMedCommsJob.com and see all the other resources, including Lindsey's careers guide. And do just stay a part of this whole process. And if you get yourselves a job in MedComms, guys, do let me know, because it cheers me up no end. Okay, so on that note, I'd like to say a huge thank you, and I'm just going to draw that recording to a halt. So thank you very much. Right, let's say goodbye. Bye.
Bye.